bringing you a steady stream of thought-provoking ideas and cutting-edge innovation. You're listening to Society and the State. Life, liberty, and your pursuit of happiness. Now, your hosts, Connor Boyack and Brian Hyde.
Hey, welcome to Society and the State. Brian Hyde here along with Connor Boyack. And chances are you may have heard something about a fellow named Julian Assange in the news here lately. I don't know, unless you were living in a cave somewhere.
I heard about this once or twice.
Well, for 7+ years, this guy has been living in the Ecuadorian embassy, more or less under house arrest, in that there have been British police stationed outside that embassy with orders to arrest him on site.
Yeah.
And I guess the whole thing has finally blown up. Ecuador says, nope, we're canceling his asylum. And as soon as that was done, British police went in, took him out, and now he's going to be extradited to the U.S., where he will face charges in connection with some government files that were leaked to him from then Bradley Manning, now known as Chelsea Manning, clear back in, what was it, like 2007?
Yeah, something like that.
Long time ago.
Yeah.
So anyway, you have a guy who published a truth that the government did not want the people to know. Mm-hmm. And Connor, there are some really serious implications here, but I'm also finding there are a lot of people who can't say, well, is this guy, is he a hero or is he a villain?
Yeah.
Because I'm getting quite a bit of feedback in both directions. What are you hearing?
I'm hearing a bit of incongruity in the sense that it kind of depends on where people stand ideologically. I saw this funny Facebook meme yesterday that was pointing this out, that it was showing this timeline. Oh, WikiLeaks exposes something that the Republicans hate, right? And so the Democrats love it, right? Like, WikiLeaks exposes the mass corruption in climate change data. Oh, Republicans love WikiLeaks, right? WikiLeaks releases information about, war crimes under George W. Bush, this, that, and the other. Oh, Republicans hate it. And so that's the challenge, I think, with something like this is it depends on like which side of the different issues you're on. Oh, Hillary Clinton, right? DNC, data, corruption, leak, conspiracy. Oh, Republicans are all over it. So that's the hard thing, I think, with something like this is I've seen very few people approach it from a principled basis. It's been almost like opportunistic.
Yeah.
And how they approach WikiLeaks.
Including members of the press corps. And to me, this is the most fascinating thing. If you would think that anybody stood to have something to lose by the U.S., helping to make this, getting their hands on Julian Assange and bringing him back here to face trial, what he did, as I understand it, is indistinguishable from what most journalists would do, in that he cultivated a source, he got information from that source, he published the information, and he encouraged his source to protect yourself. Don't let people know who it was.
Right.
Use an anonymous name or whatever if you have to. And he wanted to get more information. That's what journalists do.
Right.
Right?
And so now you have Bradley Manning, now Chelsea Manning, right? And went through the criminal justice system, came out the other side. Of course, now he/she is back in. But point is, like, the original charges have already been dispensed with. That process is done. And now Julian Assange is going to be, do we even know, indicted, charged, prosecuted?
He is indicted. He was indicted in secret, as I understand it, back in December of 2017.
And remember what indicting means. Many of our listeners may not understand what that means, because that has an aura of guilt associated. Oh man, he was indicted.
You have to have done something.
An indictment is a completely lopsided prosecutorial tool where, in closed doors, the prosecutor gets to go before a judge and lay out whatever evidence they claim they have and say, hey, will you give me an indictment? Defense is not there. The defendant is not there. There's no way to go to the judge and say, hey, no, this prosecutor's wrong. No, this, that, and the other. So an indictment is just a judge telling a prosecutor, oh, looks like you have something there. But few in the public, my sense, Brian, understand that. And so we hear, oh, Julian Assange was indicted. It's the mental equivalent for the public of, oh, he was convicted, right? I sense that it kind of has a lot of gravity for people, but they don't understand it's just a lopsided thing. So it doesn't mean that much in the end, right?
And I appreciate the explanation on that, because Julian Assange right now is being adjudged guilty in the court of public opinion. I mean, the New York Times had a headline the other day, or I take that back. It was an editorial where they talked about, well, a crime clearly was committed. Mm-hmm. Really? Has the jury heard that yet? Because right now there's there are allegations. One of the things that I've heard is that the word hacked is being used. And people kind of have this visceral, ooh, hacking.
Yeah.
Well, that's getting into somebody's computer and, probably for some criminal purpose. There was no hacking. That was an unfortunate headline. I mean, the word hack or hacking doesn't appear anywhere in the indictment.
Yeah.
It showed up in a press release headline, and that's what everybody else has run with. They read the headline. Oh, we know the story.
They've latched onto it. If you read the indictment, it's been really interesting. There was an article by an attorney with the Knight First Amendment Institute, and they were picking apart parts of the indictment and showing, and this is like actual journalism. They were showing like, look, this indictment itself presents a threat to journalism. So much of our journalism, Brian, as you well know, is just servile entertainment for the state. I mean, it's, kiss our we're bootlickers and kissing the boot that crushes us and licking the hand that feeds us. Journalism very rarely is questioning the state. And so it's been really interesting to me to see how journalists, so-called, are treating Julian Assange. And some of them I feel like, oh, he's beneath us. He's not one of us. He didn't have the credentials. It's just
he's not part of our priesthood.
Exactly.
Right?
He's not elite enough. He just published a website. He didn't go to school and get the same degree that I did. And yet you have this person from the Knight First Amendment Institute quoting portions of the indictment and then adding a little commentary. So, for example, the indictment says that it was, quote, part of the conspiracy that Assange encouraged Manning, and Brian, you were just saying this, encouraged Manning to provide information and records from departments and agencies of the United States, end quote. And so this person says, well, wait a minute. They say here, it is a basic function of journalism to encourage sources to provide information in the public interest on the activities of government. Like, how many movies have we seen about this, right? Where, like, that's precisely what's happening. The reporter's trying to get inside information. They protect their sources. They don't say, who it is and where they got it from. But when it's in the public interest, you publish it, right? The indictment also says this. It was part of the conspiracy that Julian Assange and Manning took measures to conceal Manning as the source of the disclosure of classified records to WikiLeaks. So then they go on with their commentary to say, protecting the anonymity of sources is the foundation stone of much investigative and national security reporting. Without it, sources would not be willing to divulge information, and the press would be unable to fulfill its role of holding power to account. Final part of the indictment, quote, not rather the final, but the final quoted here, quote, it was part of the conspiracy that Assange and Manning used the, quote, the Jabber online chat service to collaborate on the acquisition and dissemination of the classified records. So they're using this electronic communication medium to conspire together, right? So this person then says, the indictment similarly refers to a Dropbox. Both Jabber and Dropbox are communication tools routinely used by journalists working with whistleblowers. So this person is saying, rightly so, I think, the implications of this indictment and the pending prosecution and whatever comes out of this are profound for journalism. And why are there not journalists getting up in arms about the precedent that's being set with something like this?
I think it's pride. And maybe I'm just projecting something on them. So, if my armchair psychology is off, it may be off. But there is that sense of he's not part of us. He's not part of our clique. And yet, Julian Assange, as I understand it, WikiLeaks has won multiple awards for its journalism. And I think one of the best quotes I've heard on this matter, I can't remember who it was who said it. Maybe it was Glenn Greenwald, who talked about free press is an activity, not a group of people. It's not a clique. It's not a, it's not a guild of people.
Yeah.
It's an activity. And that means it can be done by anybody, including those who may not have a degree from a Ivy League school.
I've seen several times where Glenn Greenwald, probably one of the better journalists of our day, has been critical of his critics for trying to demean him as a, quote, blogger. I've seen him point out before how when he'll go on a certain TV show or on the radio or be quoted on a website, if it's someone that disagrees with him or doesn't like his tactics or what he's done, they will kind of, as you say, not include him in the guild. He's not a journalist. He's not a reporter, right? Maybe he's an author, but he's often going to be a blogger because that carries a perception of, amateurity, right?
Sure. It's the guy at the trailer park who yells at everybody, right?
Exactly. My nephew has a blog. Good for you, Glenn Greenwald, right?
No, I'm with you. I think Glenn Greenwald is actually one of the few journalists out there who really deserves that title. Like you, though, I'm mystified at seeing them, gleefully, well, serves Julian Assange right when this could affect them. I mean, Connor, you're a truth teller. And the areas in which you go and tell truth, sometimes you're testifying before legislative subcommittees or, you're writing editorials or that sort of thing. But you raise your voice in an effort to help people ascertain the truth. And I think every truth teller has to wrestle with the idea that this could affect all of us and our ability. I mean, look at the soft censorship that you're seeing across a lot of the social media platforms, where if your viewpoint is a little conservative to their taste, you're gone.
The hard part, though, Brian, with this is I think a lot of this is human behavior. It's not always that it's nefarious or conspiratorial or corrupt or anything like that. Think if you're a reporter and your job is to report on the president, as an example, and you want as much access as you can get. You want to be behind the scenes. You want to be in the meetings. You want to be in all the press briefings and so forth. And if you start writing stuff that is very critical of the president, do you think you're going to get invited back? And of course, the government knows this, right? They wield that power very intentionally. But it becomes this like catch-22 where in exchange for access, you're selling yourself out and you're not being a true journalist. The good journalists are the ones on the outside who are scratching and clawing and digging. The ones on the inside become just corporate masters, right? They're not really questioning anything. They're doing puff pieces. Oh, tell me about what you ate for dinner last night. And let's talk about, how that went for you. Like, come on, right? But if you start asking them tough questions that they're not going to want you around again, that's just natural human behavior. I don't want to be around people who are questioning me. And so I think journalists play into that folly too often.
I think you also need to ask the question too, because there's a very clear narrative that has been put forth. It's been carried by many of the journalists, but it was put forth by U.S. officials, British officials, basically the people in officialdom who did not like the fact that WikiLeaks was publishing, their secrets. And that is, he's a crazy man. He's, filthy and just perverted. And I mean, they tried everything to make him as unsympathetic as possible.
He smeared poop on the wall in the bathroom.
Right. Who could possibly side with such an individual?
Exactly.
And yet everything we really know about him is what's come to us through, the media.
Right.
So I kind of look at his actions and I think, would I be willing to sit for almost 8 years in essentially house arrest? Because people are like, well, he's just in it for him. Well, look what he got. Yeah, people know his name, but at what cost?
Right.
Same thing could be said for Edward Snowden.
So then I have a question, Brian. Why now? As you point out, this was almost 8 years. And why, in your mind, do you have any theories as to why Ecuador all of a sudden did an about-face and decided to actually invite law enforcement into their embassy on this supposedly sovereign soil? They invite in the British authorities to come and forcibly remove Assange. Any ideas as to why now?
The president who granted Assange asylum was President Correa, and President Moreno is the one who was elected in the meantime. So there's been a change in administration.
Right.
And I know for a fact that Mike Pence met with President Moreno after he had taken office, and I don't know what was discussed there, but it's a matter of record. They did meet. And then apparently, a $4.2 billion loan from the IMF was extended to, help Ecuador. And right after that, the most amazing thing, they decided, hey, he's not living up to his asylum requirements, and they kicked him out.
I'm reading here from the Reuters article. We'll link to this as well as the other article I quoted from on the show notes page, societyandthestate.com/137. And this is an article, as Brian just pointed out, Ecuador has reached a $4.2 billion staff-level financing deal with the International Monetary Fund. And this was announced, it looks like, in late February, so just a few weeks ago. The country will also receive $6 billion in loans from multilateral institutions, including the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, and the CAF and Andean Development Bank. And so then, of course, Ecuador's bonds surged last week after this announcement. Things are looking more positive. And you got to wonder, Brian, right? I mean, you can't write that off as a total coincidence, at least in my book.
Hey, the former president, President Correa, said that in a very angry tweet after Assange was arrested, said that Moreno had sold out. And he said this is absolutely the worst, example of government behavior I've ever seen. And he used, they sold out.
Wow.
So that was his take on it.
What are your perceptions, Brian, of the implications of what's happened? So let's fast forward in a year or two. Let's say they actually do decide to, prosecute Assange for something. Do you anticipate that has a chilling effect beyond just his specific case?
Oh, I think it's sending a pretty clear message. Be careful what you say. And let's remember, what set this all in motion was the film, or the movie, I'm sorry, the video Collateral Damage,
right,
or Collateral Murder.
Yes.
Which, I'm sorry if this offends anybody, but the truth is what that video shows is U.S. helicopter pilots killing innocent civilians,
yep,
and laughing about it and joking about it. And it reflected very poorly on the narrative of, no, we're in Iraq to liberate this place. It showed that there's some really ugly stuff that's being done there as well. And that's something that embarrassed the U.S. government. So
yep,
it's taken a long time, but this is the payback that they've been waiting to inflict on Assange for, drawing attention to something that may undermine public support or sympathy.
And I haven't necessarily seen any actual national security threats result from that video release, the cables that were released, which is like the correspondence between ambassadors and bureaucrats and people posted in other countries and so forth. Yeah, there was a lot of embarrassment because these people have been privately communicating a lot of stuff about people that they thought would remain private, right? Oh, I was in, meeting with the parliament on this, or I was meeting with the prince here and the governor here and whatever. And yeah, they were speaking very freewheelingly, and that being released caused embarrassment and tension and some challenging relationships, no doubt. But I've yet to see any concrete proof or even really serious suggestions that national security was substantially implicated or jeopardized by the release of this material. So, Brian, I'm with you. I think a lot of this boils down to getting even for making them look like they have egg on their face.
And sending the message that we don't want people doing this. Right now, Edward Snowden is the only one who is not in custody. But, do you think it's going to be long before we hear about something, to try to bring him, I'm putting him in quotation marks, justice?
Right. Yeah. I mean, he's under the watchful care of Putin for now. And so,
and he's probably safer there, than he is under, what America's government has to offer. Jacob Hornberger offered something the other day that I thought was really interesting. And that was the deal with the devil that American citizens made with their government following World War II. And before that time, when we were in wars, that was a declared war. It was fought to a decisive finish. After that, though, as the Cold War ramped up, our government came to us and said, folks, to fight against communism, we've got to engage in some dark, dirty work that you really don't want to know about. But we're going to have to stoop to the same level as the communists that we're fighting in order to torture and to rendition people and extrajudicial murders and stuff. But we won't make you guys know about it. We'll keep it secret so you guys don't have to get your consciences involved. And the American people, in order to feel safe during that Cold War, said, okay, just don't tell us anything about it. So now it's coming out.
And I think as we see the sacrifices that one has to make to stand for truth when it's up against the state, when you see what has happened to Edward Snowden and Bradley/Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, I think it does have a chilling effect. I think it does make it that much harder for the next person to say, do I really want to incur that? You look back at like Watergate and things like this, and, yeah, I mean, the people involved in previous leaks are among us and they're fine and no big deal. But man, the stakes have been raised, and the people now involved in leaks and pointing out government corruption are being hunted to the ends of the earth and extracted from embassies, albeit after many years, but as you point out, after a long time of house arrest. My fear is that it becomes that much harder for the next person to stand up. And the thing that has frustrated me the most, Brian, is, the Nobel Peace Prize, such as it is, has been repeatedly awarded to warmongers. And here we have someone who's actually fighting for peace. Maybe he smeared poop on the bathroom wall or not. I don't know. I don't care, right? I think I'm with you. I think that was meant to kind of tarnish the perception and make it easier for the public to swallow what the government is doing to the poor guy. But at the end of the day, as you point out, the actions are what matters. And here we have someone trying to expose corruption in high places in furtherance of promoting peace and transparency and justice, not with the air quotes this time, actual
Right.
justice, right? And this guy doesn't get a Nobel Peace Prize. He gets home arrest, an indictment, and who knows what's to come. How upside down is our world where the warmongers are the ones who are praised for promoting peace?
The only thing I take away from this, Connor, is this. It will never be easier to speak the truth than it is right now. So don't sit back and say, well, I'll wait until this is all blown over and it's safe again. This is as safe as it's going to get. You might as well speak the truth. Thanks for joining us. Again, if you want to recommend us to your friends, this is Society in the State /137, episode 137, and we have much more to share with you coming up.
Thanks for listening to Society and the State. For show notes, archives, and more great content, visit societyandthestate.com.